The interrogation room reeked of fear and old blood. Colonel Martinez watched through the one-way mirror as the enemy prisoner sat calmly in her chair, wrists bound, face bruised. But her eyes held something that made his skin crawl. For 3 days, she hadn't broken. For 3 days, she had been gathering intelligence on everyone who walked through that door. What he didn't know was that she wasn't their prisoner. They were hers. But this story isn't just about one woman's deception. This is about the night when 23 American lives hung in the balance, and salvation came from the most unexpected place. Before we dive into this incredible tale of courage and cunning, tell us in the comments from which city in the world you're watching this video today, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Staff Sergeant Victoria Kane had volunteered for what everyone called a suicide mission. Intelligence reports confirmed that 23 American prisoners of war were being held in a fortified compound deep in hostile territory. Every rescue attempt had failed, every drone surveillance mission had been detected, every special operations team sent to reconnaissance had been forced to retreat under heavy fire. That's when Victoria proposed the unthinkable: let them capture her. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the one pointing at your enemy. It's the one your enemy doesn't know exists. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Victoria would stage a failed mission, allow herself to be captured, and infiltrate the compound from the inside. She would map the security systems, locate the prisoners, and coordinate a rescue operation from within enemy walls. The Pentagon brass called it impossible. Victoria called it Tuesday. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment: fake dog tags with a cover identity, staged equipment failures to make her capture believable, even self-inflicted injuries to sell the performance. When enemy forces found her unconscious beside her crashed reconnaissance vehicle, they believed they had captured a broken American soldier who had simply run out of luck. They had actually captured the most lethal intelligence operative the United States military had ever trained. And she was about to prove it. Victoria's real name wasn't on any public military roster. Her service record was classified so deep that even generals with top-secret clearance couldn't access it. She had operated in shadows for 12 years, completing missions that officially never happened in countries the U.S. was never supposed to have been. She spoke 7 languages fluently, could kill a man in 14 different ways using only household objects, and had an eidetic memory that allowed her to memorize complex facility layouts after a single walkthrough. More importantly, she had spent 3 years studying the psychology of interrogation and resistance. She knew exactly how to appear broken while gathering the intelligence that would destroy her captors. The compound was a maze of concrete corridors and steel doors, designed to prevent escapes and muffle screams. Victoria had been here for 72 hours, and in that time, she had mentally mapped every guard rotation, identified every security camera blind spot, and memorized the voice patterns of 6 different enemy officers. Her captors thought they were breaking her down with sleep deprivation and psychological pressure. In reality, every moment of apparent weakness was a calculated performance designed to make them underestimate her while she gathered the information that would save 23 lives. Through careful questioning that seemed like desperate rambling, she had learned that the American prisoners were being held in Building C, Sub-Level 2. She knew that the compound's power grid was vulnerable to sabotage at Junction Box 7. She had identified 3 different escape routes and calculated the optimal timing for a coordinated rescue operation. Most importantly, she'd confirmed intelligence reports that the prisoners were scheduled for execution in 18 hours. Time was running out, and Victoria was about to transform from prisoner to predator. The first guard never saw her coming. Victoria had spent 6 hours working her restraints loose, using a technique she'd learned from a Russian defector in Prague. The zip ties were designed to tighten under pressure, but they had a weakness. Constant, gentle rotation would eventually wear through the plastic. When Sergeant Hassan entered her cell at 0247 hours for his routine night check, he found what appeared to be an unconscious prisoner slumped in her chair. He approached to check her pulse, and Victoria struck with the precision of a surgeon and the speed of a rattlesnake. One hand clamped over his mouth to prevent any sound. The other found the pressure point at the base of his skull that would render him unconscious in seconds. Hassan dropped without making a noise, and Victoria carefully lowered him to the floor. She stripped him of his radio, his sidearm, and his security key card. More importantly, she memorized the emergency codes she heard him reciting into his radio during the previous shift change. Every piece of intelligence was a weapon, and Victoria was armed to the teeth with information her enemies didn't know she possessed. The corridor outside her cell was dimly lit by emergency lighting, designed to conserve power while maintaining minimal visibility for guards. Victoria moved through the shadows like smoke, her 12 years of special operations training allowing her to navigate the space without triggering any of the motion sensors she had observed during her captivity. Her first destination was the communication center on the compound's second floor. If she could access their radio equipment, she could send a coded message to the extraction team waiting 20 miles away. But more importantly, she could monitor enemy communications and coordinate her own movements to avoid detection. The communication center was guarded by a single operator, who was more focused on a card game than his security monitors. Victoria observed him for 6 minutes, timing his attention patterns and identifying his weaknesses. When he leaned back in his chair to stretch, she moved. The operator never knew what hit him. Victoria's chokehold was precise and efficient, cutting off blood flow to his brain without crushing his windpipe. He slumped forward onto his desk, appearing to anyone watching the security cameras like a bored guard who had fallen asleep on duty. Victoria activated the emergency frequency that only a handful of people in the world were authorized to use. "Raven's Nest, this is Ghost Rider," she whispered into the radio, using call signs that hadn't been spoken aloud in 3 years. "Package location confirmed. Building C, sub-level 2. Request extraction protocol 7 in 14 hours. Authentication code Lazarus." The response was immediate and filled with barely controlled excitement. "Ghost Rider, this is Raven's Nest. Authentication confirmed. You are cleared for Protocol 7. We have assets standing by for your signal." Victoria allowed herself one moment of satisfaction before returning to the mission. 23 American soldiers were counting on her, even though they didn't know she existed. She wasn't going to let them down. But first, she had to reach them without triggering the compound's alarm system or alerting the guards to her escape. The most dangerous part of the mission was just beginning. Building C was separated from the main compound by a courtyard that was illuminated by floodlights and patrolled by guards with automatic weapons. Victoria spent 20 minutes observing their patrol patterns from the shadows, identifying a 12-minute window when the eastern approach would be unguarded. She moved across the courtyard like a shadow, using drainage ditches and equipment storage areas as cover. When a guard turned unexpectedly in her direction, she froze against a concrete wall, controlling her breathing until he continued his patrol. Every step was calculated, every movement purposeful. The entrance to Building C was secured by an electronic lock that required both a key card and a biometric scan. Victoria had the key card, taken from the unconscious guard, in her cell, but the biometric scanner would require more creativity. She waited in the shadows until another guard approached the door for his routine patrol. As he placed his hand on the scanner, Victoria struck from behind, simultaneously activating the door lock and rendering the guard unconscious. She dragged his body into the shadows and made her way into the building. Sub-level 2 was a nightmare of narrow corridors and steel doors, designed to house prisoners in isolation while preventing any possibility of organized resistance. Victoria could hear the sound of her own heartbeat as she made her way through the maze, following the mental map she had constructed during her interrogation sessions. The first cell she reached was empty, but the second contained something that made her blood run cold. An American soldier, barely recognizable after weeks of captivity, looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm your way out," Victoria replied, using the lockpick she had constructed from the underwire of her tactical bra. "How many others are down here?" 22, the soldier replied as his cell door swung open. "But you need to know, they're planning to execute all of us at dawn. They've been making examples." Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. Dawn was less than 4 hours away, which meant her timeline had just been cut in half. She activated her emergency radio. "Raven's Nest, this is Ghost Rider. Timeline has been accelerated. Request immediate extraction. We are out of time." The response crackled through her earpiece with military precision. "Ghost Rider, extraction team is 20 minutes out. Can you hold position?" Victoria looked down the corridor at 22 more cell doors, each containing an American prisoner who had been abandoned by luck, but not by their country. 22 soldiers who deserved to see home again. 22 reasons why failure was not an option. Negative, Raven's Nest. We're moving now. Be ready for immediate pickup at Extraction Point Charlie. What happened next would require every skill Victoria had learned in 12 years of impossible missions, every lesson taught by instructors who specialized in turning ordinary soldiers into weapons of precision and hope. She was about to prove that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who appears to be defeated. The key to any successful prison break isn't speed. It's coordination. Victoria moved from cell to cell, releasing 23 prisoners while explaining the situation in whispered urgency. Each soldier was weak from captivity, but they were still United States military personnel, and they understood the mission. "We move in groups of 3, Victoria instructed, distributing weapons she had taken from unconscious guards. "Follow my signals exactly. No heroics, no improvisation. We get everyone out, or no one gets out." The compound's alarm system was designed to detect unauthorized movement, but it wasn't designed to account for someone who had spent 3 days memorizing its blind spots and timing intervals. Victoria led her group through the building like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of silence. When they reached the courtyard, disaster struck. A guard who wasn't supposed to be on duty had returned early from his break and spotted the group moving across the open ground. His shout of alarm echoed across the compound, followed immediately by the wailing of sirens. "Contact left!" Victoria shouted, dropping the pretense of stealth and shifting into combat mode. "Suppressive fire and movement! We push through to the extraction point." The firefight that followed was chaos controlled by training and desperation. Victoria's prisoners were weak but determined, laying down covering fire while she maneuvered through enemy positions with the precision of a scalpel cutting through steel. She eliminated 3 enemy combatants in the first 30 seconds, using techniques that were classified above the pay grade of everyone watching. When an enemy soldier tried to flank their position, Victoria intercepted him with a combat knife, ending the threat before it could develop. "Raven's Nest, this is Ghost Rider," she radioed while reloading her weapon. "We are compromised and taking fire. Request immediate extraction at primary LZ." The response was everything she had hoped to hear. "Ghost Rider, this is Raven Leader. We have eyes on your position. Extraction inbound in 60 seconds. Mark your position with smoke." Victoria pulled a smoke grenade from her tactical vest and threw it into the courtyard, creating a purple haze that would guide the rescue helicopters to their location. Around her, 23 American prisoners provided covering fire while she coordinated their movement toward the landing zone. The sound of approaching helicopters was the most beautiful thing Victoria had heard in 72 hours. 2 Apache gunships and a transport helicopter appeared over the compound, their weapon systems eliminating enemy resistance with surgical precision. As the transport helicopter touched down, Victoria ensured that every single prisoner made it aboard before climbing in herself. It wasn't until the aircraft lifted off and she saw the compound shrinking below them that she allowed herself to believe the mission had succeeded. 23 American soldiers were going home. 23 families would be reunited. 23 sets of dog tags would be returned to active duty instead of to grieving relatives. But for Victoria, the mission was just another entry in a classified file that would never be declassified. Another victory that would never be celebrated. Another day at the office for someone whose job was saving lives in shadows. As the helicopter crossed into friendly airspace, one of the rescued prisoners approached her with a question that would haunt Victoria for years to come. "Who are you really? What's your name?" Victoria looked out the window at the sunrise breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. After a long moment, she turned back to the soldier with a smile that carried the weight of 12 years of classified missions. "I'm just someone who believes that no American soldier gets left behind," she said quietly. "And that's all you need to know." The official mission report would state that 23 prisoners of war were successfully extracted from a hostile compound through a coordinated rescue operation. Victoria's name would not appear anywhere in the documentation. Her role would not be acknowledged. Her sacrifice would not be recorded. That's exactly how she wanted it. 3 weeks later, Victoria received new orders for a classified mission in a country that didn't officially exist on any map. She packed her gear with the same methodical precision she brought to every assignment, knowing that somewhere in the world, American soldiers were counting on people like her to bring them home. People who worked in shadows so others could live in light. People who accepted capture so others could find freedom. People who understood that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that no one ever hears about. As Victoria disappeared into her next mission, the 23 soldiers she had saved returned to their families with a story they would never be able to tell completely. The classified nature of their rescue meant that the details would remain locked away in government files. But late at night, when they held their children and looked at their spouses, they remembered the woman who had appeared in their cells like an angel of mercy, who had led them through impossible danger with unwavering courage, who had proven that salvation sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. They remembered that when their government needed someone to do the impossible, they sent someone who made impossible look routine. They sent someone who turned capture into victory, who transformed prison cells into launching pads for freedom. They sent Victoria Kane, though they would never know her name, and in classified files buried so deep that most governments don't know they exist, Victoria's mission was recorded with a simple notation that told the entire story in 4 words. All personnel successfully extracted. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names are never spoken, whose faces are never seen, whose sacrifices are never celebrated. Sometimes salvation comes from people who choose to walk into hell so others can find their way to heaven. Victoria Kane was one of those people. And the world was safer because of soldiers like her who understood that true victory isn't about being recognized. It's about being willing to be forgotten so others can be remembered. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like Victoria's deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all forms, especially the ones who work in shadows. Thank you for watching the Human Stories channel, where we believe that the most extraordinary courage is often found in the most ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one is watching.